time to tantalize your earbuds with creative makers and shakers. It's Creative Living, the podcast with Jane Klaus.
This is Creative Living, the podcast. And if there's one thing I really love is a great tablescape. Okay, guys, you know this. I'm a DIYer, and there are always trips to the resale shop and the thrift stores for me for old plates and serving platters and vases and bowls. And it wasn't until I read an article in the Washington Post that I realized I was totally on trend with my table setting. So on the show with us today is the author of that article and also the home and design writer for the Washington Post. Please welcome Jure Koncius. Hi, Jure. How are you?
Hi, Jane. Thank you so much for having me. I love tablescapes, too.
I figured you would love tablescapes with this career that you have in home and writing and all this creative stuff that you do in the home. But the cool thing, I think, this article just stuck out at me like a sore thumb. We're seeing this trend in what's old and giving it a new life on the table. Why is that?
That's right. Well, it's fun. At the Washington Post, we have such wonderful reporters there. And my pal, who reviews restaurants, Tom Sietsma, started telling me about all of the coolest restaurants in Washington were showing tables full of old vintage tableware, plates, bowls, cups. And so I said, wow, that is so cool, because I have been seeing a little bit more interest in the millennials of using old china, because, for a while, Granny's china was something that they didn't want at all. And, a lot of millennials live in smaller spaces, so they don't have room to store old china.
Right.
So a lot of it was being donated or stuck in their parents' basement, attic, or garage. It's interesting that restaurants realized that, the white plate is really boring. Aren't you sort of tired of those giant square plates and the giant soup bowls?
Yeah, and there's just something more interesting about a vintage plate and about the story that comes behind it, especially when you're sitting down at a restaurant.
Yes, and I talked to some restaurant consultants, and they said, you know what? The restaurant industry is always moving forward, and the white plate, has had a heck of a run, but it's time to get some new blood on the table. And, frankly, a lot of these plates that you can pick up at thrift shops or at places like, replacements.com, which is the website that sells china and used china.
Oh, I love that's a top tip right there. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, Replacements is a wonderful place to get it, and they have a vintage section on their website. And, any thrift shop you go to, sometimes you can get a plate for 25 cents.
Yeah.
And so, one of the hottest restaurants in town, Maidon, here in D.C., which is like mid-century modern meets the Middle East, she, the owner, goes all over the world and buys plates at flea markets, like in Morocco or in Los Angeles or whatever. And, when you sit down at her table, you may get, a dinner plate, a teacup, and a soup plate, all, of different eras and colors, and yet it's sort of fascinating because it actually gives you more to talk about when you're being served your meal.
Do they tell you where those plates have come from, or is it just sort of something for you to sort of feel when you get served on that plate?
No, I think it's something that you feel like. We have a wonderful sort of bakery bistro called Ellie in Mount Pleasant, and the owners wanted the place to have the feel of one of their grandmothers. Her name was Eleanor. Ellie was the name of the restaurant, and so she loved flowered china, so they went and in search of sort of rustic, country-looking dishes and just bought stacks and stacks of them. And then, it's funny, they told me that some of their friends actually gave them sets of china that they had been keeping, that they didn't want.
And think of the money these restaurants are saving, too, by sort of repurposing some of these old plates that are just going to get tossed in the landfill or get crushed.
Exactly. It's a very green thing to do. And like one of the owners I interviewed said, the plates come in here with their own story. And, they really express who you are. And, like one of the restaurant owners said, they come with good energy. They've been used, who knows for how many years. And they have soul. It's not just a white plate.
Yeah, I feel it all the time. Like, I feel like these inanimate objects, they do have a soul. They have the energy. And so for me, I always like to think, how many years ago were these being used? And who sat here? And what did they eat? And were they happy? And were they laughing? And, like food fills your stomach and gives you joy. And now you're serving it on a plate that does the same thing.
The other thing for the article that I did was I spoke to experts on, wedding customs of today and, bridal registries and what, young people who are getting married, wedding registries, all that, are buying. And even though people are still buying, a big box set of 50 pieces of china, they don't want to use just that. So, they may take granny salad plates, or they may take, Aunt Ellie's teacups. But, they're using the old china with the white. And, they may not have the room to keep the whole set, but they might keep platters or the creamer or something because it's an heirloom and it represents your family. So don't just get rid of it. Keep a part of it if you can't keep the whole thing. So that's kind of a trend that's also developing. I spoke to somebody from the Knot, and she was telling me that, 5 years ago, people just said, well, I'm modern. I don't want any of that stuff. But now, they want a middle ground. And, stores such as Anthropology and Bloomingdale's are actually offering tableware that's made to look old or worn, which is sort of like, jeans being sold that are pre-washed and ripped.
Distressed. Yeah, exactly. Well, I also read that some of these engaged couples are not only registering for the china set, but they'll register for, 3 pieces of this type and 2 pieces of this and maybe 5 pieces. They're doing a mix and match registration because they want it. So they're able to do the ordering and get it mismatched.
Some restaurants actually use flatware that doesn't match. They just buy, handfuls of it.
So why is that such a big trend? Why are we doing that? Because we're feeling nostalgic for our family, or because it looks good?
Well, I think it's sort of like people don't want the perfect place setting anymore that looks uptight. I think this kind of looks loose and more casual and sort of more user-friendly. Like, I didn't obsess over that everything on the table is matching and perfect. No more matchy-matchy.
No more matchy-matchy. But the cool part is people who are really setting that table, they're thinking about what they're putting on it, and then they're thinking about the creative food that they're going to put on it, and they're really planning this dinner party. So there is sort of thought behind it, but yet they want it to feel loose and free and, sort of, like you said, not matchy-matchy. But there is some thought process behind the creativity that's actually going into it.
That's right. And the other thing, I recently did an article over the holidays about how ironing is no longer necessary for your tablecloth. So
what?
If you have, yes, the pros say it's okay to have,
the lines from the fold in your tablecloth? What?
Yes. And, I spoke to some people from Food 22, which is a hot home and cooking website. Mm-hmm. And, they were telling me they love tablecloths that have not been ironed and have wrinkles, which they think sort of catches the light and look prettier, and they don't look stiff. That's the whole thing. People don't want to look stiff and formal and fussy.
Right, and actually, too, with those wrinkles, it gives them texture.
Mm-hmm, that's right. And especially, today, a lot of people are using linen napkins every day.
Yeah.
They just buy something at Pottery Barn or something for, $9, and then, you're not using paper napkins or paper towels, which is wasteful. You use a napkin for, 3 or 4 days or maybe a week, and then you wash them.
I love to make my own napkins, my own fabric napkins. So I'll just get some remnant fabrics and I'll make different, napkins for everyone's place setting. But I'm also putting it on a white plate. So my next question for you is the white plate really going bye-bye? Or can we still use a white plate if we're using linens that have the pop of color?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The white plate is never going to go away. It's always going to be a basic, like a white T-shirt, and it sort of can always be the base for your table setting because it goes with everything. The other thing that's happening is people are using just wood tables, no placemats, no tablecloths. Sometimes people do a runner down the center of the table, but the plates are put right on the wood. And that's a nice look, don't you think?
Yeah, even for a fancy, elegant dinner, they're doing tablecloth, no tablecloths?
Yes.
Wow. Is that a trend that we're seeing because of restaurants, or is that something, again, that you don't want to seem too perfect and people are doing it at home?
Yeah, I think people were looking for, a release from placemats and tablecloths and just sort of, a beautiful country table. It sometimes has a distressed look to it. And it really gives a beautiful patina. And why not show that off? Why cover it up?
Yeah, and I think, true to what's going on in this DIY world that we live in, this makers movement, is, the junkyard divas and the chippy gold and, finding all of these salvage items and sort of figuring out a way to update them and then use them in our homes today. And that started business-wise. People were seeing this in restaurants, and it's sort of now made its way into our homes. Is our food service, meaning table sets, sort of following that trend?
I think so, yes. I think so. And, remember how we've gone away also from fancy flowers at restaurants. I mean, sometimes they now have, just a couple flowers in tiny little vases. And you see more of that now where down at tablescape, people will just put like single flowers in tiny little, almost like bud vases or just small little vessels that you can put one bloom in, and you just got to march those up and down the table. And that is something that came from restaurants as well. Also, the fake candles, the battery-operated candles. I mean, I personally like real candles.
Yeah.
But some people don't. And if you have a cat or something,
or a kid.
Yeah, or a kid. So those also were something that I think were picked up from restaurants and are now, being used at home.
Yeah, I love a real candle, but again, if you're going to let that burn forever, if you have a cat or a kid, you're always at risk for drippy wax or spills somewhere, something catching on fire. It seems to me that the trend is one elegant, now it's simplistic. Is there a common thread for what we're seeing, or does it ebb and flow just as fashion does?
Well, it does ebb and flow as fashion does, but I think the main thing is people don't want fussy and formal.
Right.
And so what they're doing is they're using something that was maybe a very formal china plate in a more casual setting. Mm-hmm. So that gives it new life. It gives it a new look. And I mean, your grandmother would never have put, her French Limoges on a wood table. But look at, you do that, and it has a different feeling. You don't feel uptight when you're eating off of it. And maybe, you put it with a hot pink or a navy blue napkin, not an ironed linen napkin. And so all of that, what other trend I really love, and I'm going to look for this myself the next time I'm out thrifting, is, colored glassware and how much that can add to your dinner set, or either a water glass or a footed glass, like a wine glass, in sort of a burgundy or emerald green or yellow amber. Just think of what that adds to your table setting. Clear crystal is boring. And even if you insist on a, clear wine glass, get a water goblet, that's ruby red or, cobalt blue, and just think how pretty that is.
That is, what a great idea. Yeah, I can remember back growing up, my aunt had these colored goblets, colored glassware. And I always thought, ew, that's so ugly. And now I just saw it recently because my cousins are reusing that glassware. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. But what a great idea to add a pop of color on top of your table.
Yep. And those are the things you can really find, especially if you're out for a ride in the country.
Yes.
Stop off at some, flea market or thrift shop. A lot of people are getting rid of stuff like that right now. So you can pick them up for nothing.
I love that top trend. Pick up your colored glassware right now. You say, we don't want to be fussy and formal. And what I think is so cool is that whole Downton Abbey era of a couple of years ago that was fussy and formal. But I think people latched on to the idea of using the fancy and turning it into more comfortable. So you've got that upper elegance, but yet something that can feel down home and earthy.
Well, and I think it's happening, in many levels. I think Gen Xers and baby boomers are realizing, what am I saving all this good stuff for? I might as well just use it, even every day.
Yep.
If I have silver or if I have antique plates, what are you going to use them once a year at Christmas? So I think people are pulling this stuff out, and I think millennials are deciding, I don't hate all of this stuff. I will take some of it. So that's sort of a sea change from what, 5 or 6 years ago we were seeing.
Right. And we weren't always taught to save the good china, Janie. You got to save the china. But I think you're right. We want to get out there. We want to use it. If we go to, say, taking a drive in the country and we stop by some of the resale shops or, thrift stores and things like that, or even in our own towns, do you think there's a chance we could find good quality china? Or are we just finding sort of the useless items that people do give away because you think we can?
Yeah, a lot of people are dumping stuff like that because, boomers are downsizing.
Yep.
And, if you're moving from a house to a condo, you may not have the storage space for, 3 or 4 sets of china. I mean, I know people who have really 3 or 4 complete sets because of what they've inherited. And you just don't want that. And even though you might still like it, it's time to pare down. And what a lot of people do is they send out an email to relatives that say, listen, I've got this set of china that belonged to who knows, aunt this one. Do you want it? And if you do, come and get it.
I mean, listen, that happens to me every single day. A relative's like, hey, do you want to come in my basement and see what kind of things you have for, they want to just get rid of it. But you talk about decluttering a lot. I know you're obsessed with it. Does that mean that you're in the school of the Marie Kondoing?
Well, we all have a lot of stuff. And, Marie sort of burst onto the scene here. And, people are running around, reorganizing their kitchens and folding their T-shirts in their drawers. I mean, I was amazed at how, her show, Tidying Up on Netflix, just released this huge, I think it was a pent-up demand for organization and sort of a halt to spending because a lot of this has to do with just stop shopping. People just keep buying more and more things. I mean, you just go to the store, so you buy more shampoo, and then, you look at your linen closet and you have 15 bottles half used of shampoo, and Marie's advice is so sensible. Use up what you have, or if it's ancient, just dump it. Pay attention to your things. Don't just keep buying more.
And that goes back to using Granny's dishes or using Auntie A's colored wine glasses. It's all sort of
right, you already have it.
Right, or even quilt making. So, and I was having this conversation with my sister-in-law, and we were talking about making quilts and that her mother used the quilts that her grandmother made her, and she used them till they were worn out, and she wished she didn't use them. And I said, if you have it, use it. It's a handmade item. Yeah, we can go to the store and buy a quilt that was made overseas, that was made by a machine, but wouldn't you rather hand make, keep what you have and use what you have rather than going to the store and buying something?
Oh, yes. And, even display it, even if, you're afraid to use an empty quilt. At least honor it by, putting it on a quilt stand or folding it up at the end of a sofa or a bed. And at least then you can enjoy it. And like they say, if you have an heirloom, honor it. Don't keep it in a box in your basement. That's, you're never going to enjoy it. And then when you die, your heirs are going to find it and they won't even know what it is, probably.
Yeah, they'll never know unless you write a little note on the back of it.
Yeah.
No one's going to know how important or valuable this was to somebody in your family. And that's a shame that happens, that we don't really know what the value of these heirlooms are.
Right. And they get lost in all the junk that we have,
Yeah.
I mean, I think at some point, you have to go through what you have and say, what is it that I have that is good and, sparks joy, as Marie says.
Yeah.
But when I look at it, it gives me a warm memory.
The problem with me is everything that I have sparks joy.
Well, that is a problem.
Because there's meaning behind it. But I agree. You got to pick and choose what it is. I don't believe that I have to get rid of everything that doesn't spark joy. I may need it. I may be doing a great tablescape. I may be redecorating my home, and I want to use some of this vintage stuff. So, but I am in line with using what you have before buying new, and I think that's great. Is that sort of where your obsession with decluttering comes from?
Part of it, and then just part of it, look through your costume jewelry collection. I mean, I recently sold, several hundred earrings, bracelets, and necklaces that just over the years, you've been given as gifts.
Yep.
And it's like, wait a minute, I'm never going to wear these again. And, it was great. I sold them at a consignment store. So I actually got money for them.
That's great. And by the way, people like me are out there who would want to buy those things and glue them together to make a fantastic piece of artwork for my wall, or put them on my shoes to bling up my shoes.
Sure.
Or
Yeah. And so it's great. Somebody else will enjoy them.
Right.
And, I'm sort of at the point where I have my signature look and
Yep.
I have some really good jewelry and I'm just wearing that and enjoying it,
Absolutely. I find the same thing. I wear the same, 5 pieces over and over again. I'm like, why do I have all this blingy stuff? And I have it because either it's an heirloom or I might wear it, to a fancy event. But now I'm finding like I'm going to dress down and I'm going to wear my bling because I love the idea of sparking that, fanciness.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of the same thing as a tablescape. It's not being fussy and formal, but it's still having elegance being dressed down. Oh, I just realized I dress like a table.
Well, and when you have people over, it's fun to, change your table. And when they come over, they go, oh, God, this is so beautiful. And people really appreciate it when you take time to set a nice table because,
Yes.
people don't do it that often.
Mm-hmm.
And to be invited to somebody's house for dinner is a real privilege.
It truly is.
People who go to all that trouble, and it is fun. It is like accessorizing an outfit. And every time it's fun to do something a little different.
You know what else you could do with that old jewelry is put it on a piece of twine and use it to wrap up your napkins.
Mm-hmm. True. Make napkin rings.
Yeah,
Yep.
I just thought of that as
You
we were
can
talking.
use rings for that sometimes if you have like costume jewelry, big rings from, vintage years.
That's so fun. Okay, before we let you go, trends and colors for home decor. We know that the color trend is that coral for the year. Are we seeing that leading into our home decor, or are there other colors we should be looking for?
Well, I think we're all getting tired of gray, aren't we?
Please, so over the gray.
I mean, everything is gray. The walls are gray, appliances are gray, cars are gray.
Mm-hmm.
It's like enough already.
Right.
The paint companies try to sell us on sort of a new color every year, and they come up with some explanation of what it is. But, I think the greens are sort of really still holding on as sort of a organic, natural color, in all shades of green, from like light green to, sort of a deep emerald or forest green. I think that those are very popular. Coral is popular, but coral, you can't use coral in every room.
No, you can't.
It's a bit strong.
Yeah.
Creamy whites are still popular, and people like them as a backdrop, for their art. Other things, linen white by Benjamin Moore is, always one of the best-selling colors.
Talk about quickly designing on your own. Give us your advice for the first step in the process a person should take when they're saying, okay, I want to redo a room.
Well, people, professionals often say that the rug should be the first thing you choose in a room. And then you should take your colors or your textures out of that. And, I agree with that. That's a good way to go. And then you sort of start from the ground up, and you build, whatever you're doing in the room, using small prints and textures to draw in, the colors that you've chosen from your rug.
And you've been the home and design writer for the Washington Post for over 40 years?
Yes.
Good for you.
Shocking,
That's
right?
Amazing. I mean, we're all jealous. Who can keep a job that long?
I know, but believe me, it's very unusual.
I mean, you must love
but
it.
I really like what I do. And, as I say, it's been amazing to watch this, this area change from, sometimes I think I write more about undecorating than I do about decorating with all the decluttering and organizing that's going on right now. And, people want things to look nice, which involves a lot of organization. And sort of that's a whole other topic that I've gotten into.
Yeah, and that's cool because, you got to cover the whole thing. You got to cover from how we're making it look good. And part of how to make it look good is to clearing it out. And what do we do with all that other stuff?
Anybody can make a place look nice if they organize it properly. So, and people are much looser now about, your living room has to have, a sofa, a love seat, and 2 chairs. It's changed. It's much more relaxed.
And so has the world. I love it. Jure Koncius from the Washington Post. Jure, how can people find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Jure Koncius, Jura. Koncius. And just Google my name and you'll find out all my articles from the Washington Post. So I hope you'll look up my stuff.
Great information, Jure. I know that I'm so excited about this vintage table. We're making a comeback. I'm excited about decluttering, and I think it all can work hand in hand, and I look forward to seeing more of the pieces that you write.
Thank you, Jane. I really appreciate you having me on.
Live better, creatively. For more inspiration, visit janeclouse.com. Thank you for listening.